We're going to be giving another minute for the last couple folks to jump on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So just hang with us for that last minute. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello everyone and welcome. My name is Michael Burke with Dynamics BMI. Thank you for attending today's webinar, GP2015 R2, the latest and greatest and what's in it for you. This session will be led by Sandy Wickman, the GP Product Manager for Dynamics BMI. Sandy's been installing, implementing, and supporting Dynamics GP for customers for nearly 15 years now. While continuing to work directly with customers, she's also begun recently assuming the role of Product Manager and works more closely with the Interdyne Account Executive Team to design solutions that meets the specific needs of our broad base of customers and prospects. If you do have any questions during today's presentation, please use the chat feature or the raised hand icon that's located on the right-hand side of your screen on the dashboard. Where we will also have some time for Q&A at the end with Sandy at the end of today's webinar, and we'll be answering all the questions submitted then. And with that, that should cover all the housekeeping, so you can take it away, Sandy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I'm excited to be able to show you what's new in Microsoft Dynamics GP2015 R2. And at the end, we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on the workflows in the last couple of releases based on the time that we have available. So let's dive in. This slide is an indication of Microsoft Dynamics GP's roadmap. So Microsoft is staying in keeping with their stated cadence of about 6 months of releases. So about every 6 months we can expect to see something new coming out. And in this slide we can see some of the updates or changes that we might be able to expect as we look to 2016. So the GP 2015 R2 has multiple options for being able to deploy. We have Microsoft Azure, the Office 365 integration with Yammer, with Skype for Business. There's been a lot of talk recently about the service-based architecture, and so that's also something that's really been interesting and dynamic about the 2015 releases. In that work pane, we have CRM, ERP, business intelligence, and social media. And then in a few minutes, we're also going to be talking about some of the devices that you can also start to use GP 2015 on. There are a number of really great new features that are available in R2. The 2015 release really focused on that architecture, that platform, but the R2 release really has some great stuff that we're going to be taking a look at both in demo as well as on the slides. So this is a recap of the features that are available for R2. We're going to be looking at these new sets of features based on each of the modules or function sets that are the releases or the features within that group. We're going to start out with business intelligence. It's finally showing in proper accounting order. Yep, you get debits and then credits in SmartList. We've been looking forward to this for a while. Once on the R2 release of GP 2015, the debit amount column will display before the credit amount column in the account summary and account transaction default SmartList. These same changes have been made to the corresponding Excel reports, so if you've published Excel reports, they'll show up that way there too. The columns orders were changed in the SQL tables in several of the GL tables, so you'd see that if you were looking at the raw SQL data as well. One of the most requested new features to SmartList is the ability to set the default SmartList visibility for new favorites in your system. The new setting is a small change that will have a nice impact for creating new favorites and make the folders easier to manage. This setting applies to newly created favorites only. The Workflow 2.0 has another great addition. This one will allow for the approval of new SQL views created through the SmartList Designer. Once approved, these workflows will allow users to use the Publish option to create new, refreshable Excel reports on these views. Using the Publish option from SmartList does require that the Excel reports already be deployed on your system. So we'll see the Submit button light up when we're creating new SmartList in the SmartList Designer. Before you can submit after creation, the status will show as not submitted until the approval is accomplished. And then once it's approved, the Publish button will light up for selection. So let's jump over to our demo environment and take a look at these features. So the first one I mentioned is SmartList where debits and credits show. I'm going to go ahead and open my SmartList. And let's choose the financial series. Under Account Summary, I can see my debits are showing ahead of my credits. And the same is true under the Account Transactions. The next feature that's new to R2 is the setup system that allows for the default visibility. So I'm going to go to my admin page under System, Setup, and System Preferences. So at the bottom of the System Preferences window here, I have the Enable Remember User that I'm going to make a check mark, and the default visibility I'm going to change from System to User ID. So instead of every favorite that a user creates being available to every user in your system, they would be creating them just for themselves by choosing this user ID as the default. They would still have the ability to be able to set it for others if they chose to, but by default it would go to themselves. So I'll click OK. Return to SmartList. I'll click on the Sales folder and then the Customers folder. And you'll notice if I go to Favorites now, my visible to save any new favorites under this defaults to the user ID. And the third one within this feature set for the business intelligence was the SQL View Designer for Workflow. So we're going to be looking a little bit at workflow in this section. So I'm going to jump quickly to the workflow maintenance. I'm going to choose the administration area for workflows. And I've created a SmartList Designer View approval that has an active workflow in it with one step for approval for all Designer View approvals. So within this, then, those views that were created by SmartList Designer would require an approval before they could publish. Okay, let's go see what's next. So the next module that we're going to be looking at is in the distribution series. The ability to enter a date for the received not invoiced report has long been coveted. There's a new SRS report called the Historical Received Not Invoiced Report. The current report details purchase orders, receipts, and invoices that have not been matched to a purchase order yet. The current report pulls all of the match information regardless of the date. But the new report will look back at each document and its date, either transaction date or GL posting date, to determine if the transaction should print on the report. If the date falls within the cutoff date the user has entered, then the transaction will print on the report. Next, we have the all-in-one document viewer for purchasing. So have you ever had a vendor call in wondering about the invoices related to their payment, or wondered what check paid a particular PO? Well, wonder no more. Microsoft has released the Purchasing All-in-One View. So easily now you can go and view all the transactions for a particular vendor or other purchasing documents related to a particular purchasing transaction. This window is accessible from multiple locations in GP, including the vendor maintenance window, the PO processing document inquiry window, the vendor inquiry, transaction inquiry vendor or document, the PO processing item inquiry, or even navigation lists. So let's go take a look at the distribution series options. So I have deployed my SQL Reporting Services reports into my web browser here. So I'm going to choose my to company, which is my Fabricam company. I'm going to choose the purchasing folder. And in the historical received not report, as it loads, I have my options available for my choices at the top of the window. So my purchasing transaction date for the report can either use that transaction date, which is the receipt or invoice date, or the GL post date. So I'll choose GL post date, and then I get to choose my cutoff date. So if I wanted to print my historical received not invoiced for my June 30th period end, I can choose that date, click the View Report button, and I now have a new report that has cutoff date for June 30th. All of the SRS reports have the ability then to be able to be exported out into any of the formats that you see in this list. You also, of course, have the ability to be able to print that report directly if you choose to. There are some other options available for choosing, like whether or not to include landed cost and what a functional currency if you're using multiple currencies, and even the sort by vendor or PO number as you choose. The all-in-one document viewer for the purchasing series, again, I mentioned, can be seen from a number of different windows. So I've chosen the Advanced Office System Vendor Maintenance window to be able to show this to you today. So you'll notice there's a new button at the top of the window that says All-in-One View. So I'll choose that. And I have a brand new window that gives me columns of information, including details about the purchase orders for that vendor, the receipts, the invoices, payments, and the return. So within this window, you have several different options, one of which is if you wanted to see the details that for receipts and invoices and such that apply to this specific purchase order, I can place a check mark in this box, and it filters my list and gives me the activities or the other document relationships between this purchase order and any other documents. So I can see here that I have a relationship between this purchase order and this receipt number. I can drill back to the purchase order simply by clicking on the blue hyperlink, or any other document including the receipt, to see the specifics of that. There's also a down arrow here that gives you additional details about this particular purchase order, whether there was a workflow that was inactivated at the time, and whether the approval on that workflow had taken place. If there was a prepayment involved on that purchase order, that would be displayed here. I get some ship to information and so forth. I can change the order by, and there's also a filter option. So if I know the specific purchase order that I'm looking for my vendor, I can click on the filter, and I get the option then of including open purchase orders or historical purchase orders. But I also get to use the contains feature to be able to indicate some part of the PO number. So no longer do I have to type the whole purchase order number in order to get the document I'm looking for. So if I put in 99, I should get all of them that have 99 in the purchase order number. So I can filter my list quite quickly to be able to find the specific documents and then ultimately be able to see the receipts and the invoice matches, payments and returns that go with that. So our next module that we're going to be looking into is the financial series to see what navigation, what enhancements have happened in the financial area. So within GP2015 R2, the auto deposit functionality becomes available to non-analytical accounting installations. So this is a company setup option that allows for cash receipts and trade receivables management to directly update the checkbook balance when they're posted. You will not be required to post the cash receipt again from the deposit entry window once you mark this option. Those customers who are using analytical accounting functionality will be pleased to see that the smart lists for AA now have much more data and included column for each transaction mentioned. It's a big improvement over what was available in smart lists for AA details in prior versions. There's a new workflow type that's been added with R2 for AP invoice approval. This will allow you to submit and approve each transaction in the payable transaction entry window. Approval is also available through the email notifications and navigation lists. PM batch approval workflow types is still available as well, but only one AP workflow, either transaction or batches, will be used. The other will be disabled when you choose one or the other. So do you know when a customer calls if they're over their credit limit? Now you can find out very simply. Within Receivable Setup, there are two new checkboxes to display the over credit icon and warn if a customer is over their credit. There are a wide number of windows that the icon will display, including the inquiry and entry windows. By popular demand, the inquiry windows in General Ledger have now been consolidated. Users no longer have to navigate to different windows depending on whether or not the transaction is in an open or a historical year. And the go-tos and drillbacks for all years now go to one single window instead of separate open or history inquiry windows. So let's go take a look at some of those financial enhancements. So the first one was the auto deposit cash received in BankRec. So to enable this functionality, we're going to go to our admin page. Under Setup, under Company, and then to the Options button. If I scroll all the way to the bottom of my list, I see a new option for automatically post the cash receipt deposits. So you'll notice that I have already marked that. Then I'm going to go back to the sales area page, and I'm going to open the financial area page, and I'm going to open the bank deposits window just so that you can see, for users who've done the two-step process, that I currently have no bank deposit entries to be deposited into my bank. And then I'll go back to my sales page, and I'm going to enter a cash receipt. I'll enter my cash receipt for my customer Aaron Fitz. So we'll say there was a check for $100 to my Uptown Trust check number. And I can do the apply step as usual. I'll apply it to this first invoice here. Now when I post this and close the window, I'll get a variety of posting journals which we'll take a quick look at so we can see how our checkbook is being updated automatically from this transaction. So the first one is Cash Receipts Posting Journal, which is a standard as you've seen in the past. The distributions breakdown. And lastly here, I'll see my checkbook posting journal. So it's automatically updated my deposit to my checkbook without using an additional step to do so. And to validate that, I'll come over to my bank deposit entry window and just redisplay to indicate that there are no new deposits for me to do an additional step with. The AP Invoice Workflow approval then, remember we get to choose between a workflow for approving the batch or approving invoice transactions for payables. So I've activated the payable transaction approval and created a workflow that I called capital purchases. So the workflow again called capital purchases is active. And the step for capital purchases, I've indicated that this is going to be a workflow where the amount is greater than $1,500. So I won't expect that every transaction will be approved. I'm indicating that only the ones over $1,500 might actually be considered capital purchases and therefore are a part of what I want to go through the workflow process. So in standard fashion, I'll go over to purchasing and do a transaction entry. I'll save it into a batch. I'll choose my AAA Supplies company. And I'll be sure to set my value for something over the $1,500 approval limit. You'll notice in the distributions that I have actually set this vendor to automatically distribute to a capital expense or fixed asset account. Obviously that's not related to the approval at this point, but it could be. Account is one of the options you can choose. So when this workflow is inactivated the way that it is in this environment, I now have a new ribbon across the top of my window that indicates that this is capital purchases workflow is applicable, but it's not yet been submitted. So I'm going to click on the Submit button. I get an option to indicate some comments, so if there's a reason to tell the approver why this new computer is being purchased, I can type comments in this window and then click the Submit button. I'm going to give that just a second to refresh, and then I notice that as I'm logged in as Active Directory user as GP admin, and that workflow had assigned me as the approver for this transaction. We're going to talk about how you set approvers and the different relationships in a later conversation this morning. But what I do notice is that in my workflow tasks on my home page, I now have an indication that there is a transaction awaiting my approval. So I can simply click on that. It shows that it's part of the workflow for capital purchases, and it gives me the details in this window for this specific transaction. I'll also talk in a few minutes about other ways that you can do the approvals. But within this window, I can do one of two things. I could click on the workflow button and approve, reject, or delegate this approval, or I can choose to look at the history for this workflow. So if there were multiple approvers that this needed to go through, the workflow history window would show me all of those steps and where it is in its process. So I'm going to go ahead and go to workflow and approve this. Again, I have the option to enter comments. Click the approve button. And now if I refresh my home screen, my approval task goes away because I've actually accomplished the approval that was necessary. So the next thing that we wanted to take a look at is the visual indicator for the customers that are over their credit limit. To enable this, I need to go to the receivables setup, so I'll go to the sales area page, and down here in setup, choose receivables. And there are two new checkboxes in the receivables management setup window to display the over credit icon and warn if a customer is over their credit. So I've selected both of those options. I'm going to open the customer card for our customer Alton Manufacturing. This new yield sign is the visual icon that tells me that Alton Manufacturing is over their credit limit. And again, that caution sign will show up on a number of different GP windows where customer is an option to choose. And I'm also going to do a sales transaction entry for that same customer, Alton. And I get a notification that says that this customer has exceeded their credit limit. Do you want to continue? So this is just a notification. It's not a hard stop. You can continue, but it does give them the yield sign to give them the ongoing continued queue. You also do still have the option for creating process holds to keep these transactions from going further. The combined GL summary and detail inquiry windows. I'm going to go to my financials area page under inquiry, and I'll choose the detail inquiry. I'll pick an account here, and I get to choose the year. Whether it's open or historical, I can choose whatever year I would like to be able to give me the details. Notice that there's an indication that it is a history year when I pick a historical year versus it being blank when I'm on an open year. So this works both in the detail inquiry and the summary inquiry. Again, I can choose any year, have an indication that it's a historical year, and my drill backs all work the same, but they go to one single window as opposed to a history versus open window. And then lastly, in the account window, let's see if I can pick an account that's got some more information. Then on the account summary button, again, I have the option to choose open or historical to get the additional details for the summary within that inquiry. A nice way to ease some of our navigation woes. So the next module that we'll be looking into is the Human Resources and Payroll. So for years, customers have been modifying their own payroll reports in GP to be able to mask the Social Security numbers. With this new feature, a payroll administrator has the option to mask the Social Security numbers on a predefined list of reports within Microsoft Dynamics GP without having to make report writer modifications. Or you can choose to leave them visible when state or federal requirements dictate, such as W-2s. If you apply the mask, the Social Security number field will appear with the X's as a mask so that you know that they've been masked out of your report. There's a new app that's available. It's downloadable from the Microsoft Store that's Time Management app. It's available for Windows tablets or PCs, Apple devices, and Android tablets. So employees can enter their vacation or sick time in payroll or time off against benefit time codes within Human Resources. The app will use the settings within GP to determine what type of codes the user is eligible to enter time against. There's a new window that can be accessed in the Time Management content pane by self-service employees where they can print their own W-2s. Then the employer can print all the W-2s for employees who haven't already printed their own W-2s as a new option added to the Print W-2 Forms window. Back to our demo. So the first option is to be able to mask the Social Security numbers. So I'm going to go to my payroll area page. Under Setup, under Payroll, there's a new button for SSN Mask. And any or all of the reports that are in this list can be checked such that it will mask the Social Security number in any one of them. So I've chosen the Reprint Check Register to be able to mask that in. I'm going to go back to my payroll area page to my reports, and I'll choose to reprint the journals. And I've created an option here for us to be able to look at and chosen an audit trail code. And when I print that report, you can see that all of the Social Security numbers on my report have now been masked out so that I am not revealing that information to someone who needs the financial information from this report, but not necessarily the personal information that the Social Security numbers represent. The W-2 for the employee self-service. So my user is associated to an employee in the payroll system. And so when I go to my time management area pane as my user login and view or print my W-2, I will see my information listed in a form that would show each individual year. Then I can choose the year that I want to print and click the print button. And I would now see my as Pilar Ackerman my W-2 information and could print it directly myself. And subsequently, there's a print box on the payroll routines, so I'll jump back to my payroll area page. Under routines, where I print my W-2s, there's now an extra option to be able to print my W-2s and exclude the employee self-service printed W-2s. So the system will know whether those have already been printed through the employee self-service and will not include them when you print them yourselves to distribute to your additional employees. So the next series that we'll look at is the system. The available format options for sales orders that are currently supported for emailing was only the blank document format. Now there's support in sales for the blank, short, long, and other formats. For purchase orders, the supported email format was blank as well, but now includes blank and other. You can also enable this new feature using the web client by making an adjustment to the DEX-INI file. So I mentioned the employee self-service. There's a new self-service user type that's available and it has very limited access to the system. It's a less expensive option when enables users to perform tasks such as entering their payroll time, entering project time and expense, and or creating a purchase requisition. So this is based on security. The users can have access to different things based on which GP version you're on. So within the GP2013 R2, they had different access than they will with the R2 for 2015. That W2 that we looked at in our last demo session was an opportunity to see how W2 has now been added to the 2015 R2. There's also specific new security roles and tasks that are delivered with the system so that you can roll out the security to these new employee self-serve staff without having to create unique and specific permissions yourself. The scriptable GP provisioning and management features adds additional commandlets to the Microsoft Dynamics 2015 PowerShell module for installing and configuring GP. These include commandlets for installing the GP runtime, the web components, web services, and ISV products. So I might note that in order for the email functionality and workflow to be available, you have to inactivate the web services. It also includes commandlets for creating a new GP system database and adding companies, along with adding tenants to a multi-tenant deployment. You have the ability to create templates with set parameters so that you can improve the consistency and efficiency. And an example is using a template would be a service provider creating templates for different offerings that include modules and ISV products to install. The service provider then uses the template along with the tenant-specific configuration to provision a new tenant. So all very IT speak kind of things, but all very important to those of you who are considering GP 2015. You can now scan and attach documents within the notification emails that workflow approvers receive. So this uses the same methodology as has been available on various business objects like purchase orders and payable transactions where you could attach. This will allow an approver to receive a notification email, review the included attachments, and approve or reject the document directly within the email. So let's take a look at a little bit of that system. So the first one has to do with the self-service user types. So I'm going to go to my admin page, again under Setup, and I'm going to go to the User Setup, and I now have user types available when I'm creating new users for full, limited, or self-service users. Then I also, within my user security, have a variety of new security roles that are available for the employee self-serve type employees. And it depends entirely on whether they're doing project time and expense, purchase requisitions, and so forth. So those are already available for you to be able to assign to those new user types. The workflow document attach. So in the admin pane still, under Setup, this time under Company, that's not quite right. Document attachment setup, that's what I was looking for. You have the ability to be able to allow document attachments here. Now notice that this is different than being able to send attachments in email. The send attachments in email box is for existing functionality to send emails to vendors and customers. So this does not affect the workflow message and does not need to be marked for the new workflow functionality. So I mentioned that we had some new apps that are available in GP2015 R2 and availability to apps. So what's new? So I mentioned the time and attendance app that's available from the Microsoft Store, but there's also some ISVs who have already created apps that can give you access to entering data on iPhones, Androids, any of the other platforms that we mentioned earlier. Some of those ISVs are shown here in this list. So Microsoft's unique approach is breaking down the barriers and erasing the lines between sales and marketing, between IT and business, and their products and services span on-premise, public, on cloud, and no one else can offer this to you. So end-to-end applications to enable end-to-end business processes, front-end and back-end, that are all connected. The Dynamics Business Analyzer, there's a new version, number 7, that's released that's available to any or all of these different platforms. There's a new Office app that's available from that store as well. The time management app I mentioned. Then I'd like to take just a couple of more minutes here and speak to the workflows. So GP2013 R2 was the introduction of a completely new workflow system, some of which we've looked a little bit at as we've gone through our demos. The dependency on SharePoint has been removed, and the design experience has been improved, and you now have a completely integrated system. Not only are out-of-the-box workflow types provided, but developers are now allowed to define and add their own types. There's no workflow-specific licensing, and access is based simply on role and task security. So as long as a person has access to a window which contains workflow functionality, they have access to workflow, similar to what we looked at when we were doing the AP transaction. In addition to redesigning the workflows in GP2013 R2, it was released with 4 workflow types. Then in GP2015, they added an additional 9 workflow types, and Microsoft is continuing to look to add more workflow types in the future releases as the need arises. Again, the 2015 SharePoint dependency has been removed, but in GP 2015 you would no longer be able to use the SharePoint dependent system that existed with prior versions. So one of the reasons that you might want to consider an upgrade is if you have been using workflows on the SharePoint dependent system. So the setup for workflows is based on type maintenance. So that's the highest level of steps that are creating the workflows, and a workflow manager must be assigned to a workflow type. So this, in the experience that I've had with setting up workflows so far, the place where people seem to have the disconnect is in this manager setup. Because the window is sort of gray, it's often forgotten that in order to start the workflow maintenance setup, you must assign a manager. The manager is the ultimate authority on any workflow associated with the type. He or she can change and alter steps and has approval and completion authority over any step of the workflow. Then you can do the workflow maintenance or setup of specific workflows and activate those workflows. You get to create the steps, and the steps can have 2 different types. They can either be an approval step or a task complete step. And the steps themselves can be nested underneath each other in a hierarchical fashion so that they can require multiple user approvals based on different conditions that you set up that those have to meet. The workflow user selection uses an Active Directory entity as it pertains to workflow, and it can be a user, a group, or individual entities defined within a hierarchy. And Microsoft chose to use Active Directory so that you didn't have to require workflow approvers to be actual GP users. You have the ability to be able to send notifications for completed actions back to the person who submitted the document for approval. You can have it go back based on reject or recall or when it's escalated or a number of other things so that the user who submits them has some notification as to what is happening with the document that they're looking for approval for. So this window is an example of how workflow assignments can be presented. So in our demo a few minutes ago, we also saw this gray ribbon that's now been added to show the details, and any of the users who have access to that window can see the ribbon and the View History button so that they can keep track of what's happening with their transaction approval. Again, we have the ability to look at an approval history to see what's happened with it, so we know what's taking place. We can use the navigation lists to do approvals when there's multiple approvals. So in the demo, I did the approval based on a reminder on my home page, but if I need to, I can approve multiple documents by using a navigation list approval. We looked at using the enable workflow for enable emails for workflows. So in order for it to be able to be sent out through an email process, you have to enable the email for workflows. You do have to have web services engaged, and you have to have that setup in place. So your administrators should be able to help you get the SMTP information set up so that you can use your email workflow approvals. You can delegate tasks, can set out-of-office delegations, so if you're going to be away on vacation, you don't have to be concerned about doing approvals while you're gone. You can set up a delegation and have that happen while you're away. So Interdyne has a Workflow 2.0 webinar slated for August 2015. We don't have an exact date yet, but you should watch for an invite coming to you soon if you want to have additional details on how to be able to set up specific workflows. So I wanted to just do a quick recap on the feature highlights. So there's been a number of great enhancements and features that have rolled out from the GP 2013 Service Pack 2 all the way through the Dynamics GP2015 R2 that we went through today. This slide lists several of those that have shown that we're getting some really great new things in our Dynamics GP applications in recent releases. And Mark, I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Okay, well, thank you for the great presentation, Sandy, and showing all the new features with the latest version of Dynamics. We did have one question so far, and that is, do you offer CPE credits for the webinars?
No, not to my knowledge, we don't.
Okay, perfect. And then we got another one here. On the automatic bank deposit feature, the demo showed a transaction level posted example. How does this option work when a batch is being used with multiple receipts to be deposited as one receipt?
It works just the same for the batch to be deposited together. So individual transactions posted or a batch posted would show the bank transaction total for the batch total.
Okay. And then we also have a question. Can we get a copy of the presentation so we have the slides? And I'm actually going to go ahead and send out a follow-up email that will contain a recorded version. So I will get the presentation as well from Sandy and include it in that. How much do the self-serve licenses cost as opposed to a typical full user?
So I wouldn't be able to quote pricing on the webinar. I would be happy to connect anyone who has questions about pricing to any of our account executives, and they'd be happy to give you pricing for the licensing.
Awesome. Will the history summary or detail account view still be available?
It sounds like the question is related to the query views where it's combined the historical and open years, and the data revealed there will be exactly the same as it was for history and open. It just is combined into one window now. So the data that you find there should be exactly the same as what you've seen before. It just will be, you won't have to choose two different windows to find it.
Okay.
Hopefully that was the answer to the question.
Yeah, and if there was any other follow-up, you can feel free to enter it now. We do have a few more questions here. So, will the all-in-one view work if you were only using payables?
It will, yes.
Okay. Do the approvers need full user licenses?
No, as a matter of fact, if the email notifications go out, they won't need GP licenses at all. So it really depends on how you set up your workflows. It's possible for approvals to be done just through an email.
Is there an all-in-one view for sales?
No, unfortunately, not yet. Hopefully next.
Okay, so that looks like it was, okay, never mind. We got one more coming in right now. We pull up two windows to view current and history side by side. This ability will be eliminated with the combined view.
Ah, yes, it actually will. So you would have one window available to see either historical or open transactions, so you would not be able to do the side by side any longer.
When you void a check that has intercompany, will it back it out completely? Right now, it only does the side where the check is written and not the intercompany piece.
There have been some updates to intercompany, but I don't think I can specifically answer that question. If you'd like to send your contact information through the question, I'll be happy to do some investigation and get you an answer for that one.
Okay, well, perfect. I think that is all the questions we have for now. So with that, I will just like to thank you all for attending the presentation again. If you do have any more follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to your account executive, your account manager, or myself, and we'll be able to help out with that. And on behalf of everyone on Introdyne BMI, we just want to thank you again for your presentation, or sorry, for your attendance, and have a great rest of your day.